Curious about what's been happening in our affirmation experiment? What we're discovering may change the way you speak to yourself forever. Let's talk about it. So we're 9 days into our positive affirmation challenge, and we're taking a closer peek inside our jars, and you might just be surprised what we're finding. But before we get to that, let's talk about what's really happening, what those jars are representing in our lives. It's not just about replication of Dr. Emoto's experiment. I mean, yes, that much is true, because to the best of our ability, we're trying to replicate that experiment, but it is so much more than that. And if you're new here, welcome to the family. And if you haven't had a chance to take a look at day 1 video that talks about Dr. Emoto's experiment and why we're doing what we're doing, please go take a look at that. I'll link that video in the description, and I believe it'll be at the end of this video as well. Now, each one of our jars represents a different way that we might treat ourselves. So we have the love jar, the jar we speak kindly to and we're expressing our love to. And then there's the jar that's the no love jar that we are being negative towards. So we're speaking harshly to it. And then there's the jar that we completely ignore. I mean, this jar doesn't even get a tape. You know how the other jars, if you saw, go back to day 1 video, but each of our jars, except for the ignored one, has a tape with a label on it, but the ignored one does not. That's how ignored that jar is. So what do these jars really represent? Before I get into that, I want to ask you 2 questions. Think about these questions. How do you treat yourself? I mean, how do you really treat yourself? And how do you treat others? Are you the nurturer? Do you take care of everyone else's needs but your own? Or are you the critic, finding fault in every little thing, including yourself? Or do you just ignore your own needs or the needs of those around you, your loved ones? Because just like the water and rice inside those jars, our minds and our bodies, they're going to react to how we treat them and how we're treated. Now, let me give you an interesting update on our experiment. Before we analyze the preliminary data, what we're seeing so far, and talk about what we think's really going on here, take a look at this short video that I made of our jars.
So I don't know if y'all can see this, but this is the update. And we're what, 7 or 8 days in? I can't really remember. But you can see this one doesn't have, if you can see, it's kind of hard to see. I don't want to really move it around too much. But it has nothing going on top. Looks pretty good. This one has some yucky going on top. And then this one, the ignored one, is starting to have some black stuff on top. So there's a little update.
Okay. Now that you have a visual of how things are going, let's break it down further. Just like these jars, I told you that our minds and our bodies, they're going to react to how, we treat them and how we're treated. So for example, the love jar, if you saw the love jar, it's starting to show some really positive signs. Just like us, when we feel we're supported and we're uplifted. So you can see it is completely different. There is not anything forming on the top. And I don't know if the video really did this jar justice, because the water density is really different than the other 2 jars. And it also looks like it might be showing signs of fermentation, and that is a really great thing. Now, the negative jar, it's a bit unsettling and actually kind of sad, because it really represents what most of us do to ourselves without even realizing it. And on top of the water, you can see a thick sludge, and there's some discolorization, some black forming. It really just looks like sludge. And I want to tell you something that I didn't expect to happen to me, because this reminds me during this experiment. And I'll give you a quick update on that in a bit. And I'll also give you day 9 affirmation. But for now, let's just get back to the experiment. So you can see some negative things happening in that negative jar, some things that, we may not realizing that we're doing to ourselves. Think about your self-talk. Think about your self-talk. And if you're criticizing yourself on a daily basis, the ignored jar is perhaps, in my opinion, maybe the most revealing of the jars, because you can see clearly black, moldy stuff on top of that water. And this is giving us a powerful visual of how neglect works. Neglect leads to decay. If you've ever felt neglected, or if you've neglected your own needs, you might understand this more than anyone. Now, the changes we're observing in the rice jars are a real illustration, a stark illustration of how our internal dialogue can influence our external reality. Because just like what's going on in those jars, we are affected by the kind of attention and words that we say to ourselves or that we receive. So the jar that's receiving all the positive words is thriving. So that's symbolizing how nurturing and supportive dialogue can foster growth and resilience in us. On the other hand, if you look at the jar that, negative words is spoken to, it's deteriorating. So it's a reminder of how harsh self-criticism and negativity can lead to our own emotional and psychological decline. And then there's the ignored jar. It's showing signs of neglect. So it's mirroring what happens when we ignore our needs or emotions. So it's a slow, silent type of decay that sets in. So I don't know if you can see it, but this experiment isn't just about that rice and what's happening with the water and the jars. It's about seeing the tangible, the real effects of our thoughts and words that can be reflected back to us. So it's providing a really powerful lesson on the importance of how we treat ourselves and the impact it has on our well-being. If it's not interesting already, here's where it gets even more interesting. Our experiment isn't just to show what goes wrong. It's actually there to help us learn how to correct our course. Today, why not start changing the narrative? Why not start today in your life? If you've been your own worst critic, imagine what could happen if you start being your own best supporter. Now, this is tricky and it's sneaky, because lots of times if you ask someone, or if they think about this, they're like, well, I'm not my own worst critic. But I want you to think about it. How do you speak to yourself? What do you say to yourself on a daily basis? Do you tell yourself that you're amazing? Do you tell yourself that you love yourself? I know it sounds cheesy, but it makes a difference. Or are you busy, finding fault in every little thing within yourself, be it, your personality, your body, etc. And as we continue this challenge, I encourage you to think about which jar you're actually filling up each day. We're all in this together, and it's never too late to start over with a fresh jar, a fresh start. And stick around, because I'm going to be revealing more surprising results from our ongoing experiment. Remember, it's a 30-day challenge, in upcoming videos and updates on our community page. And now, as promised, my very interesting response to the experiment thus far that completely blew me away. I wasn't expecting it, because participating in this rice jar experiment has been surprisingly emotional and more introspective than I could have ever even imagined. Initially, I thought it would be a straightforward task. Say kind words to one jar, neglect another, speak harsh to the third. But as the days passed, really from day one, to be honest, I found myself genuinely struggling with saying harsh words to the jar. I mean, I know it's just a jar, right? It just has water and rice. But it felt unnatural having these negative interactions, and uncomfortable, saying direct, harsh words at the jar, knowing that it symbolized how self-criticism could manifest in my own life. And honestly, it's something that I spent years doing to myself, being very self-critical. On the other hand, ignoring one jar made me reflect on the times I might have overlooked my own needs or emotions. And yes, I did do that. So I'm seeing this physical representation of neglect, and it's a sobering reminder of that silent damage that it causes. So this experience so far has just been showing me how deep the impacts, just reminding me actually how deep the impacts of words and actions or inactions can go, even in such a simple setup as that. So it's led to some unexpected moments of empathy and self-reflection. So it's just making me more aware. It's reminding me. That's what it's doing. It's reminding me, and yes, I'm aware and more aware of how I'm speaking to myself and the importance of nurturing self-talk. So each day that I go down and I say the love and I say the harsh stuff and I observe the changes in the jars, I'm just reminded of the power, the absolute power we hold with our words, power that can either foster growth or it can accelerate decay in ourselves, just as it's doing in these jars. So if you haven't had a chance to start this affirmation challenge yet, I just want to remind you it's never too late. Join us. Each day is offering you a new opportunity to begin. And there's no better time to start nurturing yourself than now. Use positive words, positive thoughts. Jump in with us today and see the impact it can have on your mindset and daily life. We're all doing this together, so let's just support each other in fostering this tremendous growth. This has the potential to change your life. Trust me. And before we go, here's our day 9 affirmation. I trust the process of life and believe in my journey. Now, this affirmation, I picked it specifically because right now, it's important right now in this conversation that we're having with this update, because it's about embracing trust in yourself and the journey that you're on, even when the path doesn't seem clear. So it's encouraging a deep sense of faith in what's unfolding in both your personal and professional life. So by affirming trust in the process of life, you're actually fostering patience and you're reducing anxiety about the future. So you're allowing yourself to focus in the present moment, which is so important. So this affirmation is helping you to cultivate that peaceful mindset. It's going to help reassure you that you're exactly where you need to be and that every step that you're taking, regardless of its immediate outcome, is going to contribute and is contributing to ultimate growth and success in your life. So it reinforces the idea that, and I've told you this before, that even challenges are part of a larger beneficial path. So it's leading you to develop resilience, which is so important, and a positive outlook. Thanks for watching. And until next time, take care of your mind, body, and soul.